Welcome back to the podcast. We are here today with Trent. Trent, man, how are you doing? I'm super excited. We've been talking for a while about the ELR game, and you're gonna throw some knowledge down on us today. So, how you doing, man?
And I'm doing awesome. And that's what I'm excited to have a chat with you here and let everyone know more about ELR and what I know.
Perfect. Well, before we jump into what ELR is, tell us a bit about yourself. How did you get in to the long range game itself? I don't know if you started with ELR right off the bat, but tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, no, I started just as your average Western hunter, hunted deer as a kid and just went to my local range one day just with a 6.5 Creedmoor, and just said, oh, look at that target clear up there on the hill. Like, I want to learn how to shoot it. No, I had no formal instruction at all. It was a lot of reading, read books, watch YouTube videos, and just one thing led to another. I just wanted to work my way all the way out to that mile target and learning how to get there. Like when I first started, I didn't even know what the turrets on a scope were for after you zeroed your rifle. Like I
Mm.
was, okay, you got your rifle zeroed in, you set your zero stops and never touch them again. There's a deer at 300 yards. Oh, just hold the top of the deer. That's how I started. And I've grown immensely since then. And I've been shooting competitively for 4 years now and learned to reload. Started with no knowledge, nobody teaching me any of this, all self-taught, and just worked my way up from, like I said, just the average hunter that only gets the gun out to shoot prairie dogs and hunt deer.
And when was that? What year? Or how old were you when that first started for you?
So I first started deer hunting when I was 13, and then competitively, I've been shooting for 4 years now.
Okay. Um, and it took you how long to decide to get into ELR?
It was actually fairly quick once I started competitively shooting, and at that local gun range, once I hit that 1 mile target, I'm like, oh, I wonder if there's competitions for that other than, like local weekend clubs
Mm.
or competitions with your buddies. And I just started looking around on Facebook and met a few other people who are like, hey, you need to shoot ELR, but you're gonna have to upgrade your equipment. Like the 6.5, your
Yeah.
308, not gonna do it at all. So I went and bought my first long range rifle, a Savage 112 Target single shot for $900, and that's what I competed with for the first year and a half.
Hmm.
And 338 Lapua mag. And at the time, I thought that was the biggest and baddest thing, and it was so cool shooting that. And little did I know that that's a baby compared to what cartridges we use nowadays.
Yeah, it's funny. I think you and I got started very similarly, and that's a lot of the reason why I created Black Lake Precision. Right, is for people like me and you who are very prone to like heavy research and sort of self-taught method, which I think does in a lot of way, you know, go to a lot of shooters in this industry in some way or another, but it was just so much work to consolidate information to figure out what was correct and not correct and sort of filter through a lot of the arguments that are online to find like the real information, right? And so it's super cool to like talk to somebody and that how we sort of got very similar, but it's very interesting to hear that like you that's the ELR is the like pretty much direct path you went because that's not like the typical way to go, right? A lot of times guys will shoot like PRS or a hunter match or things like that pretty aggressively. And then once they've done like fairly well there, they're like, okay, well, let's see how far I can push it, right? So that's a I think fairly atypical path, but are you seeing more and more people sort of jump into it that way with the growth of exposure for ELR?
Yeah, we have quite a few people that, skip the whole PRS, the NRL type thing, and go straight into ELR, which is great and all, but a lot of them, don't take the time to learn the ballistic side of it. And that's where I deep dove in before ELRs, deep dove into ballistics, how ballistics work, how to use ballistic calculators. I didn't even know what BC stood for at the time, like none of that. And a lot of people skip that. And I think it's good to sit down and learn before you jump into ELR and have at least basic understanding of it and how to run a kestrel, stuff like that. And I guess I'm kind of working backwards. I went straight to ELR and then now I'm doing a little bit of NRL. I did some local NRL 22 type stuff, but It's more of I wanted to understand the ballistic science and the precision that goes into it. And then once I learned that, I'm open to any discipline after.
Yeah, ELR is really I it's sort of interesting, right? Because I feel like there's a little bit of haters about it just because of like how much power you're throwing behind it and sort of the amount of time you get and things like that. But it's like every discipline has their difficulties, right? Um, and ELR, I remember when I was like first getting into it, I was researching, and I remember the Chai Tech had just really like come onto the scene, and I was like, "That's what I'm getting. Like, that's the build I'm gonna get." Not even realizing like how far it shot, what it was used for, like anything like that, right? And so it's sort of a bummer for me because being out here in California, I can't really like find that out here. But I've been able to connect with a few people in the industry, including yourself, who have been able to be a strong guide for me to figure out where to go to be able to watch these matches, do some filming, talk to some shooters. So I'm pretty excited about that. I remember you referenced to a Facebook group, I think First Aid, something to that
Uh,
effect.
Safety First Tactical,
Thank you.
ELR HQ. Yep, that's
Yeah,
that's
safety
where we
first.
kind of send everybody to start and look there. That's where all of our the rules are posted, the matches you can find local matches, and just connect with other shooters. ELR is very welcoming. I mean, it's a very intimidating sport. Don't get me wrong. I remember showing up to my first few matches and was like, "Oh boy, this is a lot to take." But yeah, you can find people in there to talk to. They'll help you with everything from helping you figure out what you need to show up for a match to the gun itself and tips on once you get to the match about the venue as well.
Hmm. Yeah, I put up a calendar at the end of last year for some of the stuff that you guys have going on, but I'm still really diving into that world, right? I'm still learning where the resources, where's the communities, right? Trying to find Facebook groups, things like that, and so there's still a little bit of exploring for me on that front. But you're right, everybody's been super nice, super welcoming. Almost every single conversation I have with an EL shooter evolves into an invite somewhere. And I would say most times than not, it's not just an invite. It's like, hey, I have an extra rifle, come shoot it, right? And so I'm not in any way prepared to go out there and shoot. I mean, I'll send some rounds down, but it's it is a really nice and welcoming community. And I think if you're in the right areas in the country, it's definitely something worth exploring and checking out, right? You've had some
Mhm.
like pretty solid finishes in the last year. How's that working out for you, man? Tell us a little bit about your actual competitions. Where are you traveling to? What does that look like for an ELR competitor?
Yeah, so ELR, the majority of the matches are in Kansas, Texas, New Mexico, but the East Coast has been blowing up a lot. There's places out there that are the hard part for them is they got to clear trees to make venues, and just they have a lot more rolling hills out. But where I'm here in Kansas, it's all flat. So mainly, I shoot in Kansas and Texas and New Mexico are the three states that I hit pretty heavily. I shoot the King of One competitions and I shoot Greystone Castle. I'll actually be going to South Dakota here, but there's quite a bit of travel involved with the sport. And the hard part of that is the venues. We have to have areas that have the lodging plus the on site shooting abilities. This year so far, I've done Spear Point Ranch here in Kansas. I took fourth overall there, and then last week I was at uh, Greystone Castle down in Texas. I took fifth overall there. That's where we have King of 1 Mile, so it's a very good training match and really kind of lets you know where you're at for King of One. And last year at King of One, I finished 14th overall, and then the year before I finished 14th overall as well, and that's the King of One Global Finals. So
Mm.
that's really my goals for this year is to crack that top 10 and stay there and really just advance myself. One of my goals is like this last match. I didn't focus on my overall finish. I wanted to focus on first round impacts on the plates. We get 5 shots per target. And what I was able to do at this last match almost met my goal of first round impacts on every target. There's only one target that I didn't first round impact, and I believe I was the only person that did that. I don't think anybody had first round impacts on every single plate. So
Wow, that's
just
pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's a matter of learning to read the wind. A lot of guys send that first shot down there and go measure, use their reticle, measure off of it, and then get their wind call. Like they're two MOA, we're 1.5 to 2 MOA plates down there. So, and in my head, and as understanding ballistics, I'm like, I should be able to hit a two MOA plate at whatever distance. Well, reality is that's a lot tougher than you think it is when we're out past a mile or out to 2 miles. Two MOA plate is real darn tiny out there.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm working on an article. It's sort of a long, I'm probably going to work on it for about 6 months because I'm really just diving into it. And it's around this idea of rifles hammering, right? You hear that a lot in this industry, right? Oh, this rifle hammers, this barrel hammers or whatever, right? And I go, what does that even mean, right? And so I'm sort of diving into that idea because I find the biggest gap in this is between PRS shooters and F class shooters, in what they consider accurate rifles, right? And precision rifles,
Mm-hmm.
because the disciplines are different, the way you have to do it. But nonetheless, I'm sort of going through each one and I'm saying, okay, this is what would qualify as like a hammering rifle for this discipline, right? And ELR is interesting because when you watch sniper movies, right? And they talk about like the effect of the Coriolis and all of it and drift and all of this stuff, you know, you think that that's just like every discipline, but really it's like your discipline only, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you don't really like factor that in very much, maybe a little bit at 1,000 for what we're doing, but it's really not, right? Like you guys are the real, if you had to say like that's like the real stuff, right? So, a hammering rifle there is going to be far different because of the distance and things like that. What are some of the ballistic differences? And I know you don't do a ton of outside of that discipline, but ballistically, what are you looking at to hit targets that far?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. This is what I spend a lot of time explaining to people. They're like, "Oh, my rifle, PRS, I'm shooting quarter or half MOA. It's doing awesome." I said, "No, that's great. What's your extreme spread and your standard deviation on your reloads?" Because I can have a rifle that shoots one whole group at 100 yards, but if it has over a 10 feet per second extreme spread, that's a target width at a mile or 2 miles, that's the height of a target. So between a shot that moves 3,000 feet per second and 3,007 feet per second, or 3,010 feet per second, that's a miss.
Hmm.
So reloading is extremely important. Yes, you need to have that rifle shooting a quarter MOA group, but your most important part is your reloads. Like how consistent are your reloads, and then at those type of distances, if you have one shot that drops off, you need to be able to tell like, oh, I had a pressure spike, or that load just wasn't good for that, or that particular reload wasn't good, and how to adjust for it instead of chasing that bullet. Like, okay, this one dropped zero point 0.2 mil low. I need to bring it up zero point 0.2, but then you look over at your chrono and see, oh, that one went 10 feet per second slow. Ignore it. Continue with your current data.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. And you guys get to use quite a bit of gear on the line, right? Like, what are you guys
Mm-hmm.
using? I don't know. I don't think you guys have any wind flags out there, right?
Nope, no downrange wind indicators are allowed. So that's a big difference between ELR and F class is, F class you have flags you're able to
Mhm.
look at down, and ELR you have what a lot of us look for is we're in wind turbine country. So you get to
Mhm.
look out and look at wind turbines that are a few miles out there. And then the wind zero has been popping up a lot more in competition, but a lot of the guys, you can't fully believe the data because we can't put those down range. We're allowed to put them at the firing line. At the firing line, the wind's going right to left, but you look down at the target, it's a left to right wind, and knowing how to factor that in and take it into play, and just being able to read mirage is very, very important. Look at the brush, look at the trees, the grass, the way the dirt picks up when you miss. Like a lot of those are very, very important in learning how to get the most accurate wind calls and first round impacts.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, though we've talked about the Wind Zero a little bit. They're a sponsor of
Mm-hmm.
Black Plague. So I have some of their stuff I've been testing out, and Part of what I want to do is actually have this sort of at an ELR setup, things like that, just as a at a training session, right? Where it
Hmm.
has its most value for most disciplines is as a training tool, right? Not as a
Hmm.
competition tool. Some people
Yep.
don't fully grasp that, and so it's interesting because yours is really difficult because you guys are shooting so far. Your guys' max ordnance is super high up, right?
Hmm.
And I have a 25-foot pole that I run my one of them on because that will sort of get me where I need to be at 1,000 yards,
Hmm.
right? And so, but for you guys, like I don't even know where how high you're going to place that. So it's still a bit of a guessing game because I've sort of noticed by testing these that if I place a wind meter at like 10 feet or like 8 feet above the ground, and then I place one at 25 feet above the ground, it can sometimes be the difference in just like my area that's not even that volatile, like 8 miles per hour, right?
Hmm.
Which is a huge shift. And so it's really interesting, like tools like that. You guys are also running chronos on it while you guys are shooting then?
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of them have either the lab radar or the Garmin mounted on their rifle.
Have you seen any of the Athlons out there yet?
Not an ELR. I haven't seen
Uh,
any of the Athlon ones out there.
Yeah, I'm curious to know how they're doing. I had a chance to visit over there during SHOT Show, and first initials on them look pretty good, but
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, I like the Garmin a lot. I ran the speed tracker, the Mach 3
Hmm.
for a long time. Those are really cool. But those Garmin's, man, they work so well. They just like place them and they work. I love them. Sounds like
Yeah.
I'm pitching them. They're not sponsored or anything. I just like them. So, so you guys, so you're out there. Do you guys have team matches as well?
Yeah, so that's one thing that's been popping up a little bit more. There was one at Spear Point where they had a person that shot light, or I think they took four people. You had two people that shot light, two people that shot heavy, or there's a hunter mix in there as well, and did a team format. They're just kind of we're messing around with some different match formats, trying some new stuff to help grow the sport, bring new shooters in. That okay can shoot. Maybe we're creating a hunter division, which is 30 cal and I think it's 16 pounds, which
Mhm.
are limited to. So just to draw, the more everyday people that might have the equipment already without having to go out and build a specialized rifle just for this.
Yeah, I've been talking to people about how I'd love to see an ELR. Well, I guess it'd be like a light ELR or maybe even light F class
Hmm.
competition because F class is getting so competitive. I'm like, let's push it back an extra couple 100 yards and make this a little more difficult for everybody, right? Um, and obviously, like I'm a big proponent of hybrid rifles. It's a really tough sale to be like, hey, go spend $8,000 or whatever it is for one rifle that does one thing right. And
Hmm.
for most people who I think aren't trying to be like the best in the world like you are, it's advantageous, right, to have a hybrid rifle that you can switch between disciplines, go out, have fun, but that's still slightly competitive. So I like that a lot. I do want to talk about something that's a little controversial in your guys' industry. And maybe you can give us some insight on this, right? I want to talk about world records or records because you
Hmm.
and I sort of touched on this a little bit where like there's people that are shooting and they're shooting very far, but it isn't in a competition format, right?
Hmm.
And so can you give us a little bit of context on this? Like when does a record count, right?
Yeah.
Are there times where it makes sense that a record that isn't shot in a match would count? Like where does that record lie? Is there some sort of like out of that division? Is it just like in the
Hmm.
air, Fugazi, like it is what it is? It's like you get to say that you have the world longest shot. How does that work?
Hmm. Yeah, so the main one the record we go for in ELR is the cold bore world record. And what that entails is you cannot have shot your rifle that day. No one has gotten the shoot at that target yet. And you have to have at least 20 people there watching, and you have to have camera on the shooter as well as the target and laser verified ranging, which most guys are using like Vector 21s to get them within a yard. And how it works is you get like 5 minutes And this has to be your first rounds of the day, first shots. You can't even check your zero, no nothing that day. You lay down, you have to put 3 shots on that target. I think the current one is right around 3,000 yards is where the
Mhm.
record is. And you have to put 3 shots in a row on the target to qualify. A lot of people get 1 or 2, but 3 in a row really solidifies, the cold bore world record. Now we do have longest shot competitions, which are separate. We had one in Raton that was called the King's Gambit. It was just kind of a side match for King of 2 Miles, just as another thing for us to do while we're all there. And I think it was 4,400 yards, I want to say.
Mhm.
And they had 8 or 9 people snag it. But it's just more of that was just more of a to shoot and engage the target and get data on it, and then just a little bit of bragging rights. It's not known as like a world record and going for. And we have lots of people that put the videos on YouTube saying, "Oh, I shot 3 miles," And the big thing is we like to ask the people, okay, how many people were there as witnesses? How did you verify the distance? And was there camera on both the target and the shooter? And just a lot of them, they're all missing one piece of that. And we love to invite the people out. We're like, hey, looks like you're doing a really good job with your rifle, learning how to shoot that far. Why don't you come to a match? And, we would love to shoot with you just to grow the sport. And a lot of those people will never show up to a match. And we don't know if it's because they're intimidated or if it's whether that video was fake or not. And a lot of them don't say, they're like, oh, I hit 3 miles, and we ask how many shots. They're like, well, it took 48 shots. And we're like, well, that doesn't count.
Right.
We could walk. A lot of the people at this match could do the same thing. To walking in, we have 5 shots to hit a target, and after that, it doesn't count for anything.
Mhm.
So that's a matter of precision and just walking it into the target. There's a big difference.
Sure. And obviously somebody who, whether it takes you 50 shots or not, right? You shoot 3,000 yards. That's something to brag about a little bit, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we have people bragging for less on a golf course. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that,
That's right.
if you go out and you can do that, all right, that's great. Awesome. But I do think, a level of understanding, respect, and I'm sure, I find a lot of times there's this idea that people who do competition shooting are elitist.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, well, you have all these rules, you have all this gear, like, we're living the real outlaw life. We're out here just shooting. And that's fine, right? That's great. Like,
Mm-hmm.
whatever promotes the growth of long range shooting. But ultimately, right, just like the NBA, just like, football, whatever the case may be, there's rules and there's ways to
Mm-hmm.
qualify and for things to be judged. And so it's great that there's people out there that are adhering to the format and they're nailing it, right? And it's exciting, and it's sort of a cool thing too, right? Like there's I'm sure you guys are all sort of friends in some way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Buddies, but there's a sort of a different thing of having like 5 of my buddies who I shoot with all the time and we make it out that far, and then having a group of 20 people who I sort of know, and you get this impact, and that's like some powerful, like, you can make some Queen overlay music on stuff like that. The excitement is, it's pretty neat, right? So you guys are out there, you're doing the work. Let's talk a bit about what does it take to get into this industry and become, you know, I always say let's start where you can be competitive, right? I'm not necessarily saying we
Yep.
need to do a build where you're gonna win, because I think a lot of that does come down to preference. And then obviously you can't discount win, you can't discount your ballistics and
Mm-hmm.
understanding the knowledge base. But if we're trying to get in, you're what's the starting basis for us on this?
Yeah, so the cheapest but most accurate way in, and it's where I started. I started with, like I said, the Savage 112 target and 338 Lapua. That one, right out the rifle out of the box, all I did is put a scope on it and started to reload, and I made finals for King of 1 Mile the first year.
Hmm.
It's, that's a $900 rifle, and then you got to get your optic and your reloading equipment if you don't have it. That's the easiest way in. There is a lot more rifles that are getting factory rifles that are starting to get a lot more designed for ELR, but budget wise, some of them are absurd, like the Barretts. Those the average person, like I don't even own any of those. It's just out of the box off the shelf, those are $8,000-$10,000 rifles, and
Mhm.
instead of spending money on something like that, you can build a custom rifle for a lot less. But
Mhm.
factory wise, sticking with like a 338 Lapua, 300 Norma mags are actually, if you look at them ballistically for the light division, shooting these closer distances, they're not bad. They hold their own pretty well. They're gaining a lot of popularity. Um, it's any rifle that I would say 30 cal and over that you can run high BC bullets and you can reload very well for. And that's a great way to get started and be fairly competitive. You're going to have a tough time competing against the full custom rifles that are running high horsepower cartridges in light division like the 33XC. Like that,
Mhm.
you're going to, because the 33XC ballistically is not that far off from a 375 Shytech.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of horsepower difference between, the 300, your 300 Norma versus a 33 XC. Just a standard 33 Lapua versus 33 XC. There's a big horsepower difference there.
Yeah, and depending on how you get into this, right? We could talk about this a little bit, but in F class, there's like I sort of have this idea of a family tree, right? And
Mm-hmm.
it's not your actual family, but it's your shooting family because you're starting to see like fourth generation mentorship, and you're starting to see people who would take 5 years, and then people who would take 2 years, and now people who are taking 6 months to get at the level, right? And I'm not saying they're necessarily winning, but they are top shooters, right? Like top 50%, which is where you ultimately want to
Mm-hmm.
get, because after that it comes down to time, right? You got to get enough
Mm-hmm.
time in the sport. And so you guys have something like that in place for you guys, right? Like sort of, do you see that where you're like, that guy's really good, he took somebody on, and now that guy in
Mm-hmm.
6 months to a year is just nailing it?
Yeah, no, there's a lot of people. So like I would say the average age for ELR shooters 40s, 50s. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm very young compared to most of them. I had a lot of people, willing to take me under their wing, teach me like what I thought I knew about reloading, like reloading for my hunting rounds and stuff was not even a level compared to ELR reloading
Mm-hmm.
and the differences and how important it is. But there's a lot of people that, I still have several mentors that I reach out to when I'm having issues or just seeing some things that aren't normal. And then there's a lot of ELR shooters starting to put on classes now, where you come out for the weekend they meet you at a range and take 5 shooters on and teach them how to true up your kestrel, how to get positioned better, just kind of they can take you from the basics all the way to pretty much as far as you want to know. And there's not a whole lot of gatekeeping in ELR. Like
Mm-hmm.
I know it looks on the outside like, oh, there's a lot of jersey shooters running around, like high profile guys. There's not a lot of gatekeeping, between us, especially a lot of us at the top share information to each other. Like, hey, what BC are you actually getting at it? This bullet with this twist and this barrel.
Mm-hmm.
We share data back and forth, a lot. And I help anybody who reaches out to me. I am like, hey, this is what I did wrong when I was getting in. Like, hey, I bought this and I shouldn't have bought this. It was a waste of money. And
Mm-hmm.
helping people, I take a lot of people and say, hey, this is the cheapest and most effective way in. Or if you want to jump right in and buy once, cry once, this is the way to do it. Don't don't go up all these levels. If you want to jump right in and you want to tell me what your budget is, and I'll make it happen for you or help you get the most effective out of that.
Yeah, that's how I am, and I go back and forth on it because I'm patient, so I'm willing to wait,
Mm-hmm.
an extra 6 months and a year, 2 years, if that's what it's going to take to get the best thing. But then I go, but then I could have been shooting for 2 years, so
Mm-hmm.
you sort of go back and forth on that. I'm sure you've dealt with that yourself as well. Talking
Mm-hmm.
about gear a little bit, tell us about what you're running. Currently, what are I don't know if you have a couple builds, but what's your competition builds looking like?
Yeah, so this year what I'm running is it's a version of the 33XC. It's a reamer that I designed. It's called the 33 Spa. It's 338 caliber bullet. I'm shooting a 300 grain bullet around 3,200 feet per second most of the time, but I back it down depending upon the venue and location on speed wise. What I am running for chassis wise is Accuracy Solutions. It's called their Mako chassis. It's made of micarta. Been helping promote them. They've took me on for years now, and I help them sell their products, the Bipod EXT products as well. I'm using a pristine bolt action, testing that this year for the first time, kind of helping them break into the ELR market. And then I run K&P barrel, smaller barrel manufacturer in South Dakota, but it's probably used by 75% or 60, 75% of ELR shooters, just because Ken is well known in the 50 cal community for like those type of shooting competitions, and just knows how to make big bore barrels accurate. Scope wise, I helped launch the Telson Target Master Victory this year, getting it exposed a little bit more. I ran it last year as a prototype, kind of underneath the radar. This year, it's out for everyone to see. And then bullet wise, I shoot for cutting edge bullets, or monolithic copper bullets that I get to shoot, and that, you know, are extremely consistent BC wise and out of the box. There's no weight sorting, no met plat trimming, none of that. You pull them out of the box and load them, and the BC is going to be the same between every lot.
Well, that's pretty impressive. I do want to touch something you very nonchalantly under the radar said, that you made your own reamer
Yeah, no,
for your own rounds. You
yeah,
said
I
that like that's
we
not like a big thing or anything. Like that's not like a normal thing that happens in this industry. Tell us about that.
Yeah, so David Tubb, very well known, I believe, in the F class community, because at the NRA Whittington Center,
Hmm.
the Tubb, that's called the Tubb range, the 1,000 yard range. He designed the 6XC, 33XC, 41XC, oh, and 37XC. I took kind of his, and that's what I've shot for 2 years now, the 33XC, and there's just some tweaks I wanted to make to it, tighten the chamber up in certain areas, just change some dimensions, and that's one thing, that's kind of my next development step over. I shot very well for the last few years. Now I'm creating my own thing, tweaking it to exactly what I want. And that's where this year I designed my own reamer. I've been shooting it, and I have I think I have 4 or 5 other shooters that are running it as well. And, just tweaking some things, trying to keep the brass from growing, excessively growing in some areas. And that's the other thing, brass is expensive in this sport. So if there's ways that, I can design something to keep that brass and make it last 10 firings instead of 5 firings, just to save money for the shooters themselves. And that's just a big part of it, is just trying to dial in the equipment to its full potential. And that's my goal that I look into. I look at it as a kind of statistics side of view, and more of math and science than just going out and shooting. Like, I look into the fine details of it and wanting to make the best of everything, and push the equipment and myself to the most precision I can get out of the complete unit.
Yeah, this might be the only these might be the only series of sports in the world where you spend the most money you can to save money.
Mm-hmm.
You don't really save. It's the very odd. You're like, well, I want to get 10 rounds on that, but then I'm gonna buy a $10,000 rifle, and you know
Mm-hmm.
what? Let me try a new action, a new barrel, and I have a buddy right now, a bench rush shooter. He's got 8 blanks sitting at his house right now. Just waiting. Whenever he needs one, he's
Mm-hmm.
gonna get another one. And I've had an opportunity to the area I am in, because we have the Sacramento Valley shooting center out there. There's some really high profile shooters that are out here for bench rest and F class. And I had an opportunity to shoot to meet a guy who set a couple world records, and they all own their own lathes. They all like chamber
Yeah.
their own barrels. Like, they're like, yeah, it's just like another, $10,000 purchase. And then, however many years it takes to get good at that. But that is what you see it a lot, sort of to your, point. When you start to get to a certain level, it goes beyond a lot of that stuff. And it's like, okay, well, how do I make something that makes sense specifically for me? Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really interesting to see that. So far as reloading, what does that look like for you, equipment wise? Um, I follow the reloading game pretty closely, but not everything is immediately designed for large caliber like
Mm-hmm.
that. What are you running for that?
Yeah, so I started out with just, the Hornady lock and load press, single stage press, and once I got past 338 Lapua, it just doesn't handle calibers like that. So, instead of going through and jumping up the steps of, oh, I want this press, and this press, I just bought once, or, paid once, cried once. I have
Mhm.
the Prezi press. It's the Turbine Prezi press from Germany. They're made in Germany, single stage press, but it can handle cartridges up to 150 millimeters. So literally anything that I would ever want to reload, I can do on that press. And
Mhm.
then scale wise, I just started with the same balance kit, that comes in most of them, until I realized, hey, I need to step it up a little. Like, I need to be able to weigh to the kernel. So I bought the FX 120i scale. I don't run the auto trickler like a lot of people do. I just haven't made that
Mhm.
investment yet. The scale is the most important part. I like speed and getting it. Get I don't care how fast I reload. It's more how accurate I reload. So doing that, and I'm only reloading 50 rounds for a match,
Mhm.
whereas a PRS shooter, is 150, 200 rounds.
Right.
So big difference on whether speed matters or not. Annealer, I run an amp annealer. That's what I found. I had some flame annealers in the past and just couldn't get it to be as consistent as I wanted. So I made switch to an amp annealer recently,
Mhm.
and that seems to be making a little bit of a difference for me as well.
Yeah, I just sold my amp. Uh, it's I'm gonna talk about that at some later point, but amp is great, right? The
Hmm.
press you have, I've never heard of, but that's one of the fun things about what I do is I get to find companies that make really, really great products that you may not know about in your discipline that could be of use to you,
Hmm.
right? So that's super interesting. Um, but yeah, you're running a lot of great stuff. I don't know, are you trimming your brass as well?
Yep, yep. I just trim with just the regular Hornaday
Okay.
trimmer. That's one thing I kind of designed with my reamer as well. I trim it when it's virgin brass, and then after that, I measure it just to confirm none of overly grown. But that's one thing I designed to where I don't have to touch that as much, and I absolutely will not neck turn. So I don't have the patience for it, and
Yeah.
I haven't seen the need for it in ELR because I'm able to get an extreme spread of 5 to 7 and an SD of 2 or 3 without neck trimming. So as long as I can keep doing that without neck trimming, you will never see me with a neck trimmer.
Yeah, I'll keep you posted on that. I'm working with the auto data right now, the MTAP
Hmm.
system, all of that stuff. And I sort of told you one of my goals is to build a rifle for every discipline. Not only just so I can learn it and go out and engage in what we're actually doing, but also sort of to your point, right? I meet a lot of people, and they're interested and they don't have the rifle, and if I can partner with companies and build rifles and use that as a way to bring more people in the industry by letting them come out and shoot them and try them and things like
Hmm.
that, all the better, right? So when I get to that point and I am necking those brasses, I'll let you know if if it makes any sense. But that auto dot is pretty crazy piece of equipment, and I know that a lot of guys are running it in F class. Um,
Hmm.
for a reason, right? A lot of guys on the world team and things like that. So clearly, what a lot of people don't understand about them is that you also, like you said, you also have to have it chambered correctly for that
Hmm.
purpose, right? So it's not like you can just do it on every piece and it makes sense and things like that. So either
Hmm.
way, so you're running some pretty cool stuff. What about like what does powder look like for you guys? Or what do you guys have a preferred powder preference?
Yeah, so most of them are going to be your slower burning powders. So think of like your H50 BMG, your N568, 565, and um, some of the guys for the XD are running your H1000, your Retumbo. That's kind of the area most of the powders are in because we're trying to push as big as bullets as fast as we can. So we need that slow burning powder so we don't have case head separations, and we're running quite a bit of pressure in a lot of these. And barrels are looked at as a highly consumable item in EO. Like if
Mm,
you're worried about barrel burning, stick with like a 375 Tech or something like that. Don't get into one of the Wildcat cartridges where, our goal is to make that barrel last one season. So
mhm.
some guys that's only 700 rounds, other guys that's 1,000 rounds, and we kind of pick your bullet speed depending upon how many. If you need to shoot 1,200 rounds this year between all the matches, you're going to slow that bullet down a little bit. And slow and consistent is just as good as fast and consistent. You just need to understand how the environmentals are going to affect that. Because, I know that this barrel that I'm running now, I'm doing a test on it, running it's a very aggressive twist as well as an aggressive speed. Like I know 600 rounds is this barrel's toast.
Mm-hmm.
But I've the same cartridge that I've run. It's the same cartridge that I've run in the last 2 years, but I ran the bullets in a less aggressive twist and slower speed, and I was getting 12 to 1500 rounds out of it. So it's a lot on how hard you want to run the equipment.
What's your guys' sort of average speed that you're seeing out there?
Most all the cartridges, light and heavy, are running from 2950 to anywhere to 3150. That's kind of where a lot of the people are ending up speed wise between all the caliber or all the cartridges and calibers.
Man, I would have thought it was running so much quicker because that's like, well, right, maybe 30, 50 would be like where you see like the
Hmm.
top, like some of the top F class guys will get it,
Hmm.
right? But like right in the 2900s is where it's at. So I'm surprised they're not running a little, a little hotter than that.
Oh yeah, there's some of us that are running 3,200 feet per second, knowing that hey, this is hard on brass, this is hard on everything. That a lot of people, there's a few of us that just push it to its limits when you can, just because depending upon the venue and like I'll shoot and how far we're shooting depends on how hot I load that rifle as well. Like this weekend where we're shooting up to 4,000 yards, I'm gonna want some extra horsepower to get down there and make bigger splash on the misses,
Mm-hmm.
as well as there's 4,000 yards of wind I'm battling instead of only 3,000 or 2,000. I need that extra push that to get down there to increase my hit probability percentage.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Man, it's all so crazy, and the barrel thing is really interesting, right? I remember there's certain things in this industry where it hurts just a little bit to hear it, and
Hmm.
when you hear like how much brass like the top guys are going through in a season, right? When you hear how many barrels they're going through, things like that, you're like, oh, I better start budgeting that into everything if I really want to be
Hmm.
competitive at this, right? But for those of you that are this is really, I try to express to people that like that level of competitiveness is like, it is a sport, right? And that's how you're treating it. You are an athlete, you are a competitor. You're, in all things like that, it's going to be an expensive venture, right? If you're out there and you want to compete, and you want to do local matches and things like that, it doesn't need to be that, big of an
Hmm.
investment every year for you and things like that. And that's where it's fun to try out different disciplines and maybe do a little bit of there's ELR rimfire, right?
Hmm.
um and so there's things like that you can do to it's not what you would typically picture, but there's ways that you can have fun and do it. Shoot, I would go shoot a long range BB gun league if they had it, just to try it out
Oh
and have
yeah.
fun. It would be pretty cool. And I know that air gun world's really blowing up, and
Hmm.
they're sending some big stuff pretty far. So that's pretty interesting. You want to talk a little bit about Telson while we're on? I know that I'm going to be, talking, with one of their owners and things like that. But I'm gonna pull this out so everyone can see. We just got in a scope yesterday that I'm going to be taking a look at. We're going to be doing a review. Like, I'll just try to get it in frame here so everybody can see it. But these are really nice. I was surprised how nice the action was on these. I switch out all of my caps typically to MK machining. They do a lot
Hmm.
of caps and stuff for the industry, but these have a lot of really nice action on them. But is this the same scope that you're running?
That's not the exact same one. That's our Target Master 5 to 25. I'm running the 5 to 32 Victory. Both same
Okay.
reticles, a little bit different turret function, a little bit different glass, and
Mhm.
that one is very very well designed for like the competitive 22 shooters.
Mhm.
That one, and it has a 3 turn indicator. So if you want to shoot really far, it pops up. The locking turret pops up in 3 turns. I run the 5 to 32 Victory, even though I don't magnification wise. I usually, and most ELR shooters, we only end up around like 18 to 24 power. Nobody really goes over that. So um, I'm running the 5 to 32 Victory. Had it for a couple of years now. I was one of the prototype testers. Took it out last year underneath the radar. Made King of One finals with it. And like, okay, this scope, it tracks very well. The glass is extremely clear, and it's a lot more affordable than a lot of the other options. I'm seeing in ELR, like the Attacker and the
Mhm.
Mark IV. Zeiss. Some of the scopes. There's Tangent Theas running around, ZCOs. I'm like, man, like that's a big step. And when I got the Telson scope, I put it next to, those high end brands. And I'm like, man, this scope retails at the Telson scope retails at $2,000. These ones are all 3,000 plus ones. And I don't see
Mhm.
that much difference. And I've been very impressed with the reticle that was designed in it, the people that contributed towards that. The tracking is dead nuts. That's one very important thing in ELR is how well the scope tracks. You know, say it has a lot of elevation in it. Well, cool. That's all cool and all, but how well does it track at,
Mhm.
20 mils, 30 mils, 40 mils, when you dial, how close and accurate it is. And that's Telson I found to be extremely repeatable for tracking wise. And then it's held up very well on these rifles, we put it up on 460 Steyrs and 50 cals, and it's held up extremely well.
Yeah, the thing I'm excited about with Telson is right. Let's get this out in the open to start out, right? I own a March 8 to 80, so I am a
Mm-hmm.
scope snob in general, right? I mean, I invested the money, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to go out there and say that you should just buy any scope, right? I have my opinions on this, but I do try to take a deep look at all of them. I'm going to be testing quite a few scopes over the next year, taking a look at them. But the thing that excited me about Telson, first off, when I got it in my hands, like I was surprised on the weight and the build. Not to say that I thought it was going to be cheap, but when I felt, I was like, oh, this is really like, this is a nice feel to it. But I've always had this theory within all of the disciplines that there are companies that likely are just as good, that manufacture just as well and have just as good a quality at better price points. Their marketing budget just isn't as good, right? And as a
Mm-hmm.
person who got my master's in media and public relations, and I've done marketing for 15 years in some way or another. I understand what framing is. I understand what the loud voice can do. And so I've always been very interested in finding companies like this. And not to say the Telson's new, but I would say they're emerging, right? They're
Mm-hmm. Oh,
really,
very much so.
they're growing, capturing some market. And when I heard that you were running this on an ELR, not this one, but when you were running a Telson on your ELR, I was really surprised, right? I just sort of figured that you would be running what would be traditionally considered a high end or premier or elite rifle, right? Or scope. So,
Mm-hmm.
what sort of gravitated you to this? And I like this a lot because it's sort of in line with how do we get more people into the industry at an affordable price point. And to me, this perfectly aligns with that mission. How did you
Mm-hmm.
sort of stumble onto this, and why have you, stayed with it, right? Because you don't have to, and you did.
Yeah, no, one thing I do like about ELR is the companies come to us or the shooters because they want to try to create more competitiveness in the market.
Hmm.
Like, hey, I have this stuff that's just as good as these high, well known brands, but we'd like to break into the market. Would you do testing on it? And one thing I liked about the Telson is one, the people behind it. Everybody that works for Telson is a competitive shooter or hunter first, and this is their passion involved in it. It's not a big corporate company by any means. And then one thing, another thing that I liked is, the smaller companies, they like more feedback. They'll take the feedback and use it, say, hey, I don't like this about the scope, or could you try this or tweak it? That goes all the way up the food chain so much faster than a bigger corporate or a global company, where you're one shooter, you're a drop of water in a bucket, compared to you. Where these smaller companies, really take the feedback and use it. And then one, they're more willing to help promote you, your sport, what you do. So it's kind of a win-win for each of us. And I really like being able to promote a scope that's a more affordable option for people to jump on into ELR with, and a company that, puts a lot of price certificates on price tables, tries to give back as much as they can. to the shooting community as much as they're limited to. They can't put free scopes on
Yeah.
every competition table because they're not that big a company yet. They would if they could, but
Hmm.
instead, it's like, hey, we'll put discount percentages off there, to try to get more people, one, to try the product, and two, give back to the shooting community and support it as much as they can as well.
Yeah, I talk to a lot of companies about this, right? Because in the capacity of what I do from time to time, I do some consulting work, some brand development, things like that. And, I tell them shooters shoot companies that support their community, right? It's just that's
Mm-hmm.
the way it is. We're very appreciative people. And in a lot of ways, we're very brand loyal as well. When
Mm-hmm.
we find something that works, when we find companies that contribute to the space, and they help out, and then also like this is really interesting because um, you know there's so much out there, and it's hard to weed through everything. And then there's a bunch of stuff out there. There's just really no content on it all, right? And you're like, well, I have no clue.
Mm-hmm.
It could be good. It could not be good. When you're a smaller business and you're wearing 15 different hats to try to grow the business, marketing sort of falls to the wayside because you're trying to figure out how to just get sales in, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
I'm really excited with the way that they're going, the way that they're approaching the market, the way they're contributing. Again, I haven't done any testing on this, and I'm just borrowing this item. So we'll see how everything lands, but I am going to look at it glass wise against the March. I am going
Mm-hmm.
to be looking at it against the Collis 5 to 25 DLR. I have a ZCO coming over later that I'm borrowing, a couple other items. And so we'll see realistically how it matches up and things like that, right? But from first impressions on it, right? The uh, there's a weird thing in shooting. We really like the audible sound of clicks. And so
Yep.
the click sound, it sounds very good. It's very tactile. We like the filling as well, especially if you're the sort of person that tries to dial without necessarily paying attention to it, and you do it
Mm-hmm.
by feel, right? It feels very good on that front. I did hold it up. I have a magnifier that I hold stuff up to with light, and to see the 3 point indicators, the silver come up. And I was like, oh, that's
Mm-hmm.
actually pretty neat. That's like a cool little feature, right? So um, I'm excited about it. And I'm excited to really continue to figure out what they're doing, watch to see how they expand in the community. And it's sort of a good case study, right, for companies that want to grow in this market, and they sort of feel like they can't because it feels like so much market share is bought up.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't think it is. This is a $1 billion industry, right? And people will buy more than one scope. That's just the way it is. They'll build more than one rifle. So this is a really
Mm-hmm.
exciting time, and it's cool to see that it's making sense in ELR. Obviously, I'm going to be. I don't have ELR ability out here, so I'm going to be taking it out to 1,000. I'm going to be doing a lot of shooting at 300 and 100, and maybe try to get it out to the field as well. See how that works, but. Um, it's interesting times in the industry. So, outside of sort of this product, what other companies in ELR should we be paying attention to that you maybe you have an affiliation with or things like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because uh, what I find a lot of times, and maybe you find this as well, is I talk to a PRS shooter. They don't know 90% of the companies that focus in on bench rest or F. And
Mm-hmm.
it sort of goes both ways. And it's sort of really odd to me because I'm like, you realize that that piece of reloading equipment will help you in your discipline too, right? What is
Mm-hmm.
there like that for you guys?
Yeah, so companies that I'm affiliated with, Accuracy Solutions on the chassis and bipod extension systems, they've
Yeah,
been
that's
one breaking
the
in for a
company that has
while.
the Orca, right?
Yep, yep.
Yeah.
And that's the
Okay.
rifle that's over my shoulder. That one is in one of their chassis. They give back a lot to the shooting community and support a lot of the matches. And there's actually one match that I went to. It was a fairly sizable match. Went through and found 80% of ELR shooters are using one of their products, which is extremely
Wow.
impressive.
Mhm.
So, that shows one, how much people are believing in the product, and then two, the company behind it, that we want to support. Cutting edge bullets, I shoot for them. They give a lot of certificates to matches, discounts to people, um, help sponsor a lot of matches, and then a lot of matches that's just a drawing for a $200 gift card to their website. They put in for a lot of people, especially for the rookie divisions. They do a lot for them. The bullets are more expensive than your traditional uh,
Mhm.
lead core bullets, but in this sport, you need everything. You need less. You need the most consistency out of every item as you possibly can get to
Mhm.
get the highest hit percentage. So it's one thing just making the jump to them. um, Long shot target cameras, they do a lot providing cameras for the matches. The owner shoots matches with us even, as well. He does quite a bit for the industry for promoting, helping bring other not just himself, but bring other sponsors to the events. Um, Gosh, there's so many companies to rattle off that
Well,
do a
it's
lot for
funny.
us.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned long shot. I was actually going to ask you about that because
Mhm.
um, I do. I seem to see a lot more of their products being used for ELR, right?
Mhm.
Especially that mounting system you can put on your scope,
Yep.
which I'm actually like been trying to find. What I want is a spotting scope that I can throw my camera on. That's really what I
Mhm.
want, right? But there's not a ton of resources on that front. And so I've been looking at other ones. I have a trigger cam, but that does not work on a spotting scope. So
Mhm.
I've been looking at stuff like that, and I did have an opportunity to interview their CEO when we are their owner when I was at
Mhm.
SHOT Show, and super nice guy. Gave me a lot of information on their product, and it's definitely something I'm looking to dive into. Sometime in the future. But that's great to hear that he's out there shooting, they're out there contributing, things like that. And this might, to the listeners out there, might sound like we're just pitching a ton of products, but the truth is like we want to know what people are using, right? That's just
Mhm.
the reality of the industries. I'm like, what are you shooting? What's the round? What's the load, right? What makes the difference? What have you used and what haven't you used and what have you got rid of and things like that. So I appreciate you sort
Mhm.
of giving us the secret sauce, that you're out there, that you're working with, that you're doing really well with.
Mhm.
So far as we sort of get ready to wrap this up, is there anything, particularly about what you're doing, the industry, the companies you're partnered with, that you want to make sure we cover before we jump off?
Yeah, I just want to make sure that people understand the stigma behind ELR. Like everybody is welcome to come to an event, and if you don't have a rifle for an event, reach out to the match director. And there's people like me who have an extra rifle that for a rookie, hey, you cover a little bit of the ammo cost, and then they'll probably reduce your entry cost even. Like come out, shoot, have fun with us, hang out with us. We're there all day. You're gonna make several new friends. Sorry about your wallet, but you're gonna have so much fun with us. Just come out and shoot with us. Well, we're not, a lot of us do wear jerseys, but we're not, people that won't talk to you. Like, we'll be your buddies. We'll add you on Facebook, chat with you, answer any of your questions. So come on out, shoot. There's some pro am matches, if you're interested in shooting a match, reach out, go on Safety First Tactical, look on there for those pro amateur team matches and we'll hook you up with somebody. Even if you don't know anybody, we'll find somebody for you. If you don't have a rifle, let us know. We'll do the best we can, or let us know what you have, and we'll help you do the best you can with it. Push your limits with it. And I've taken people that have never shot past 100 yards, and in their first competition, hit 2,300 yards. It's a lot of fun. Just stepping aside and helping somebody do that, and watching them do that is almost just as much fun as me hitting that same target. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. Obviously, we appreciate you being on today. And I haven't shot ELR. I will at some point. But what I will say is I put out an article not too long ago again from West Coast Long Range doesn't make it to a mile clinic.
Mhm.
And one of their participants cried after she hit 1,000 or after she hit a mile, right? And so, it's not easy to do, especially, just make it to a mile, and you guys are going further out than that. So, if you're looking for maybe even like a once in a lifetime experience, right? Or you're looking for something special to do for your birthday, or you want to send your husband or wife out on a unique experience, right? I mean, something like this could make a lot of sense. You never know what it's going to turn into. Could turn into a passion and something that they have for the rest of their lives. So, Trent, we appreciate it. Before we jump off, If people do want to get in contact with you, where can they find you? How can they find you? How can they reach out?
Yeah, so I have my most active on Instagram at Southpaw_outdoorsman. You'll have to type it in word for word because I'm shadow banned.
We all
Facebook
been there.
at Facebook at Trent Elsen is a
Mhm.
great way to find me as well. And yeah, and if you're interested in any of the products that I run, I'm always willing to help you hook up with the company owners or help you find discounts on it. You know, that's one thing that I like to do is try to help everyone save as much money in this expensive sport as possible.
Yeah, we appreciate that. And as always, we will, we'll have his information linked in the bios and things like that. So if you need to reach out to him, you can feel free to do that. In the meantime, keep an eye out for him, right? Follow, see how he's doing. We're gonna keep him honest, right? He's trying to become one of the best, so we got to make sure that we're following along and supporting, this journey. For all of you guys who tuned in today, I appreciate it. If you have a chance, get out to the range, take a shot, and I will see you guys next time.